So today we're going to talk about Malfurion. He's been around a long time. He's had changes left, right, here, the other. His base kit still remains the same. He still remains to be one of the better healers in the game, but he's fallen off because more healers tend to be more well-rounded or they fit a specific niche. If you're picking Malfurion to be an every game hero and you're going against something that has a lot of burst damage, you're going to really regret that. Going against a lot of burst damage like a Jaina can be kind of devastating. Going against the Kael'thas, however, can be good or bad depending on the Kael'thas build and how much damage your team is taking, because technically he can burst you, but at the same time he's relying on cooldowns. It's really about the totality of the enemy team on when you can fit Malfurion in, which is why you shouldn't really try and force Malfurion to be an early healer. At lower levels, you can probably get away with just picking Malfurion no matter what, and things are going to be okay. For Malfurion, I want to talk about one thing in his base kit that you're definitely doing wrong, and I'm going to explain to you why. Your roots are a 12-second cooldown. They take a brief, I think it's like 0.35 seconds for that middle area to get the initial root, which is why, if you're wondering why you're missing your roots, that's probably why. And it starts from the middle and goes out. If you're using your roots without some type of CC, whether it's a slow, whether it's a stun, whether it's a root from another hero, and you have a tank that has setup and follow-up, and you're not following up the tank, and you're trying to be the setup person, you're already using Malfurion wrong. Not only that, but a 12-second cooldown is actually pretty generous. It's kind of that middle ground. I mean, if it's really that impactful at an instant root, it would probably be a 14 or 15-second cooldown. The thing about the roots is that if you're not following up on CC with roots, that means you're using it wrong. To further go down that path, the problem with that also is that if you've ever played Malfurion, which most of you, if you've been around a while, have played Malfurion, you're going to be like, yeah, sometimes I have mana issues, man. I got to back early. My team doesn't have healing. They're just going to have to take this rejuve. I'll be back in a bit. It's because you're using roots on cooldown. Stop doing it. Stop doing it. Spamming roots is probably one of the worst things you can do as Malfurion. Yeah, it's appealing. Yeah, it's there. But you need to make sure you have a guaranteed route, not a, ooh, they're moving around, I need to disrupt this. If you're on Dragonshire and they're on point, you can put the route behind them so they can't walk through, right? That's a guaranteed route. You can put it down on a gate versus a retreating team. That's a guaranteed route. Just trying to put it out there because you think that you're going to get a route is not good, okay? So first and foremost, if you're doing that, then you're probably having mana issues, which is one of the things that you're doing wrong with Malfurion, which it might also make you pick the bad talent at 13. And we'll go down the talents here in just a second, but I want to get this in your mind that for Malfurion, yes, we know what the Q does. Yes, you're going to spread that around. Yes, we know that W is a skill shot, which is how you get any type of semi-burst healing. Because if you're not hitting W, don't pick Malfurion. But stop using roots raw. Stop just throwing them out there hoping that you're going to get that. Unless you have a guaranteed one by yourself or you're zoning out to force somebody out, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. It's always better to save that. If you don't have your root to follow up on any type of tank CC, which every tank has something to set you up, then you're using it wrong. If a Johanna even goes in with a condemn and a slow, that's a much easier route to land. And that's a bad form of CC when you compare it to something like a Garrosh that can just throw you, a Diablo that can stun you, or an ETC that can slide. Any type of CC you can use to follow up on that is going to be far better than you can possibly use by yourself. You're now talking about their CC, your CC. We're talking about 2.5 to 3 seconds normally of CC because this is a 1.25 second slow. Don't think about it as damage. Use this as a utility tool, not as me going out here, I'm spamming this until, the cows come home. Regrowth, of course, is going to be great for overall healing. W is going to give you damage. It's going to give the reveal, which can also be helpful in a bush. Don't forget you can use that. If you're on a boss on Cursed Hollow, you can use that in the bush behind you. You can use that in the bush in front of you to check, so you don't have to face check anything. It's only 10 mana, so not using this for vision is kind of silly. So make sure you get utilization out of the vision there. But of course, healing off of your W is going to be helpful. Now let's talk about the talents, because this video is done a day after we just saw a talent change to Malfurion, and it was Rejuvenation. Now, first and foremost, Celestial Alignment should be your go-to number one, but I'm going to talk about reasons why you might go something else. Shando's Clarity The only time I would see this before is if your Jaina somehow didn't pick Globe Talent at 1 and then forgot to pick Arcane Intellect at 4. That used to be the only time I'd ever see anybody pick Shandos. It can work well for your mages like Li Ming or Kalthas, but overall, I'm not a big fan of it. Yes, you get more cooldown reduction. Yes, it's going to get cooldown based on regrowth. I'm just not a big fan of it because you can bring more to the table with Celestial Alignment. If you've watched any of my videos, I talk about how comfortable you need to be as A-moving for any hero in the game. Another case in point here is if I'm using Celestial Alignment, I want to be able to W and then auto attack because it now means that I can do more than just heal and I can bring something to the table. Rejuvenation has caught my eye though because casting regrowth on an ally also grants Malfurion its effect for 50% normal duration. So this kind of takes it, if you've ever rotated your Qs, you know that you should be the last person you press Q on because normally you're the last person taking damage unless you're that crazy person that walks forward pressing W and auto attacks right in the middle of their team instead of just attacking the tank. You know what I'm talking about. So Rejuvenation, I think, does do well in a lot of situations if you're going against a Zeratul, if you're going against a Samuro, or you're going against a Sylvanas that has a lot of W that went maybe W build, so you're going to be taking more AoE damage, or maybe a Kalthas at lower levels to where you know your teammates will be spreading fire with Ignite. And this keeps it so that you don't have to use Q on yourself, which means that you can now continue to prioritize your team, which you should be doing anyways, and you can prioritize trying to set up CC. The reason why Malfurion can be a little difficult for some, it's easy to press Q and then press W on the enemies. You want to hit as many enemies as you can, but you don't want to go out of your way to hit the back line. You just want to hit it right on top. Samuro, to me, I love when people pick Samuro because that's 3 easy targets that I'm always going to get W value on. And the more targets, the better. But with this means that you can be more proactive in healing your team and being active in a fight and not have to worry about yourself. If you're not comfortable A-moving and moving through and fighting, then maybe don't go Celestial Alignment. Shando's Clarity, I think, is an extremely niche situation that is reliant on your mages and a certain play style, and I think that both of these will generally win out better. And Celestial Alignment, I would say, is still number 1. But again, there are circumstances with these changes where I think this can be really good so that you don't ever have to press Q on yourself and you'll get that value there. Cardicius, welcome back to the JHow. Using that Twitch Prime sub. You got one place only. You choose to use it here. Not going to edit. I have to edit it, else my YouTube video gets demonetized because of that song. Back to the thing. All right, so that's your level 1s, and I think it's a 2-horse race, and I think both of them are situational. Celestial Alignment can be good every game. Rejuvenation, I think you only need in certain situations, and there's enough of them to bring merit to that talent change. Now, at level 4, everybody loves Vengeful Roots. This thing has been nerfed so many times. If you haven't played Heroes of the Storm in the past 2 years, or the last year and a half, you don't know how many nerfs this has actually been through. This used to do a lot of damage. And it made Battle Malfurion pretty strong. This has since been nerfed. So this can do well. So one thing that Vengeful Roots does is it allows you to do things like soak tower shots, soak keep or fort shots. This will continue to scale. The keep and the fort does not. So if I walk up to a keep in minute 1, or minute 2 or 3, whenever I get 4 available, it dies in 1 shot. But if we get to 17, 18 minutes in the game and I put an E down, it's not going to eat 3 shots, which means that means my team can now move up and be able to dive stuff. This is also great if you have guaranteed CC because it's going to give you extra damage. The one thing that you got to remember, this adds damage to the Treant. It's 58 damage. The odds of it hitting more than 2 times are dependent on the enemy team being bad. And then if I get 7+ damage, and realistically speaking, you should get about 15 to 20 stacks at most in a game, in a reasonable game, unless you're just a god, which I can guarantee you, for consistency's sake, you're not. So you're talking about maybe 100 extra damage. I always talk about what you can do for your team. I still think Vengeful Roots is good because it adds a little bit of extra burst damage because that means that you're following up CC. If you're just putting this out there raw for stacks, then you're not helping anybody because you're getting your damage, but you're not doing anything for your team. So with that, I want to bring up 2 good options here because Strangling Vines is good versus healers like Rhaegar, Whitemane potentially. There's a lot of healers that you have to say, who heals quickly? Lucio has Amp It Up, but that means that he has to amp it up and not see that you have healing reduction, as opposed to, I want to make sure that if my tank CCs somebody and then I root them, it means that that first CC, and you have to play it like this, that first CC puts panic on the other team because it's like, uh-oh, they're in trouble. I better help them very fast because they're going to die. Let's assume it's a 1 second to 1.5 second stun from any of the tanks that you have out there. Your instant reaction from the other team, and if you think about how few cleanses there are in the game, is I've got to get heals and I've got to be able to help them instantly, which is where Strangling Vines comes in. This is dependent on you following your tank for CC to create that moment. And I think that's why people struggle to want to pick this, because it requires them to follow their tank and they're not putting their roots out raw. And they don't like to do that. Not only that, but it also depends on the enemy healer. So there's variables that go into Strangling Vines. It can be good, though, in a lot of situations based on the other healer. On the other side of things, Deep Roots. It grows 25% larger, which means that you can zone out an entire area, and it persists for 40% longer, which means that you have great AoE zone control that the enemy team can't pass through without being rooted, and that's better for you. I actually really like Deep Roots in most situations. It's more forgiving. It covers an entire area. You can zone out enemy teams really well. You can split enemy teams based on the sheer size of this. And Deep Roots, I think, becomes pretty good as a result. Vengeful Roots, I've strayed away from. I'll go to it if the situation is right and we have that single target burst and the CC set up for it. Else, Deep Roots, I think, is really good. Strangling Vines, really good. I would say Deep Roots is probably the safest bet to pick this first and foremost. Vengeful Roots is... I know most of you watching are going to be like, that's nice, JHow. I'm still picking Vengeful Roots. Just try doing different stuff, seeing what you can do for your team. Again, I preach about this all the time, is if I can get a bigger root and I can help my team, it's going to do a lot more than 100 damage from my Treant. It's going to do a lot more than 150 damage from my Treant if I've even stacked remotely well, which means that my Deep Roots can now help my team do anything. If it helps one of my characters do one skill shot, I guarantee you that skill shot's probably more than 100 to 200 damage. I can guarantee you that much. And so you got to start thinking about, if I follow up CC on my team and I have good follow-up CC, Treant might be good for the initial burst damage. But Deep Roots and Strangling Vines, theoretically better. Try it, I promise. Now, I've said this on every healer video and anybody that has an activatable. If you have a cleanse, you need to pick it. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care what you think you can and cannot do. You need to be comfortable picking cleanse. If you're Rhaegar, if you're Whitemane, if you're all of these heroes that have some type of cleanse, then you have to pick it. The difference about Malfurions is that he has to have a regrowth on them, and you can't pre-cleanse somebody. You have to do it after they've been CC'd, which is why it's a 45-second cooldown. And if you started to think about what I was mentioning earlier, the last person you want to press Q on, or Alt Q, is yourself. The last person you want to have a regrowth on is yourself, which is why I said situationally Rejuvenation would be good. What this means is that for Nature's Cure, I can keep a hot onto 4 people without having to worry about myself. The minute I add a 5th person in, myself, it now becomes more difficult to keep a regrowth onto everybody, which means that I might not have 100% uptime on those other heroes, which means that now Nature's Cure might not work. The other cool thing about this is that it removes it on all allies. So if there's a double power slide, I can theoretically cleanse 2 people. And that makes Nature's Cure even better. Just like every cleanse in the game or every removal, you need to use this as your first option. I don't care if you think that you can't do it. You need to practice it. You need to do it so that you can be better for your team. This is a better talent in all stretch of the imagination. Tenacious Roots, don't do it. I'll pick this if I'm memeing an ARAMs and I go Vengeful Roots, because I can just walk into a Johanna Condemn and take this and then root again. One thing about roots that is also really good is that if you're being dove by somebody, all you have to do, like let's say it's an Illidan, let's say it's a Zeratul, let's say it's a Samuro, all you have to do is Alt E. That's a self cast onto yourself. That root will go down directly underneath your feet, making it very difficult for anybody to do damage to you. Back in the day when Malfurion had ice blocks, you could Alt E and then ice block. They can't stand on top of you because they're rooted. So if they get rooted, you walk away. If they stay on top of you to do damage, you just press ice block. Now you've rooted somebody, they're not doing anything to you, and your team can kill them. There's a reason ice block was removed, because that was so broken. So tenacious roots don't do it. Wild growth, and you don't want to go onto this. Each hero hit by Moonfire extends the duration of currently active regrowths by 1 second. If you have been keeping up with everything at this point, because you're not actively using regrowth on yourself, you should be able to do a sweeping regrowth, and we'll do it by the math. 5 seconds between cast. This lasts for 20 seconds. And if you have 4 people, 5 times 4 equals 20, which means you can continue to cycle that all the way through. And that's how regrowth cycling works, which means wild growth, not that great. Nature's Cure, infinitely better than anything at this tier. Now, here's the big one. Because when do I go Tranquility versus when do I go Twilight Dream? And the problem that I see is that a lot of people go Twilight Dream. Why? Because it does damage. Yes, the silence is there, but it's like, I get to do damage and silence people. Pros and cons. There are times where you want to use this. Here's a case in point. If you're playing against an Abathur comp, their entire principle is to clone somebody and just try and destroy you within those 15 to 20 seconds that they have before you kill that clone or before it expires, whichever comes first. Tranquility is what helps you survive onslaughts. That is when you should be picking Tranquility. Or you know that you're sitting there, you're taking consistent damage. If I'm going against a Lunara, if I'm going against a Sylvanas, I'm doing all of these things. The thing that people forget about Tranquility is that you can still use your abilities. This isn't like Lily Jugs where you can't press your buttons. You can still use your abilities. Furthermore, you get 10 armor from anybody that's in that Tranquility. So you're healing, plus you're giving them higher effective health as a result with 10 armor, and you're still able to press W and Q and heal everybody in the meantime, which makes Tranquility really, really good as a result. It's an 80-second cooldown, which means it's there for every major team fight in the game based on time. Twilight Dream is when... Man, this is hard because I'm a huge fan of Tranquility. Twilight Dream, if there's a mosh pit, etc., Twilight Dream has a massive area, which makes it easy to stand outside of the mosh pit and cast your Twilight Dream. That's a good interrupt. That's a great interrupt. If I can use that, it's much better than what I can do with Tranquility. There are times and places where you know that the enemy team is going to be running towards you. And if you have 2 to 3 people running at you, you can utilize that. I remember telling a viewer a long time ago, the minute you see a Malfurion walking up, I mean, think about an Uther. An Uther is going to walk into the enemy team so you can drop hammer and use Divine Storm. Malfurion's no different. You have a more forgiving area, a much larger area for Twilight Dream. If I see that, and I'm a damage dealer on the other side, I remember telling somebody I was at Sylvanas, right? And they ended up using it against me in a game. If Malfurion's walking forward to use that Twilight Dream, I'm just going to hit him with a Wailing Arrow as they come in. I'm going to punish that Malfurion before he can ever silence me. And that's what makes Twilight Dream really scary. There's so many different things that you can do with Twilight Dream, but in terms of what is more consistent, what's better for your team to stay in a fight, to allow them to do what they do, Tranquility is generally better. Again, I'm always going to use the damage number. Yes, at baseline 310, it'll go up. I can do 400 or 500 damage late game. AoE damage, that's all well and good, and a 3-second silence. But if I can keep my team alive and they can do all that damage for me and they can stay alive, keeping my team alive is my first and foremost responsibility. You can keep your team alive with Twilight Dream. If you're going against a lot of spell-casting heroes that are also semi-dive heroes or even remotely close, you're going to hit them. Most of the time, you're going to be hitting melee-style heroes, and that's what makes it difficult. But Tranquility, you can never really go wrong with Tranquility. That 10 armor, somebody's getting pyroblasted, and they've taken a lot of burst damage. I can Q, I can W, I can Tranquility. They have 10 armor. Hope that they live. This is bonus healing that I don't have otherwise. Twilight Dream won't save them. and balancing out when you're going to have that, I think is very difficult. And I've played on different levels of difficulty for Smurfs in my main account. A lot of people go Tranquility, but the good ones that I've seen, or a lot of people go Twilight Dream, excuse me. And a lot of times they don't know why they're going Twilight Dream. They just know it does damage and that they get a silence. And most of the time they should be picking Tranquility. Abathur comps, Sustain versus a long time, Lunara comps, Sylvanas comps, Raynor comps, Hanzo comps, Phoenix comps. I mean, imagine Phoenix using Salvo. He just got buffed yesterday. 10 armor for everybody plus AoE healing. Twilight Dream doesn't save me from any of the people that are actually doing damage. It's only when you have dive heroes that you're going to be able to hit at least 3 people while also not completely sacrificing your own positioning is when you should probably go Twilight Dream. And that, to be honest with you, is less often than you probably imagine. And Tranquility is going to be better. I'm going to say Tranquility is my 1A. And Twilight Dream is just going to be B. There's no 1B. I'm pretty sure Tranquility is going to be a much better choice. Level 13. Okay. There's 2 good talents here. I think if you had paid attention earlier and you heard about not spamming roots, Revitalize doesn't do anything for you. Basic ability cooldowns don't do anything for you. Your regrowth, again, you're cycling no matter what. And even if it's yellow on this one, green on this one, yellow on this one, red on the other one, you're going to hit the red target and you're going to have that 100% uptime because, again, you should not be worrying about casting that rejuvenation on yourself unless absolutely necessary. And therefore, Revitalize, your basic ability cooldowns don't do much. Your E is going to be pretty much for primary follow-up. Your Q, you shouldn't have any issues with that in terms of rejuve cycling. And the mana, again, if you're using your E properly, this isn't a very good talent. I can see why you want to pick it, but it's not good. The really good talents here are actually hindering Moonfire. Most of the time, if you're casting Moonfire, yes, you'd love to hit 2 to 3 heroes, but at the same time, this is a very short cooldown. So I have no problem just sitting here spamming this on a tank. Garrosh, for example, is a fantastic example that I can say, you know what? I don't want this tank diving me. I don't want this tank hurting me. 25% slow. Somebody steps up to try and do damage. 25% slow for 2 seconds. 2-second slow on an ability that has a 3-second cooldown means that that's pretty high uptime. And I can slow somebody for 4 out of the first, 5 seconds, you know? So I use it. I have 2 seconds slow. 3 seconds later, I've got another 2. So for the first handful of seconds, I have 4 seconds of slow within a very short time period. And that's a pretty decent slow. This helps you control a lot of frontliners. You're already going to be Wing most of them. It can also help set up stuff. Keep in mind that if you are trying to land your roots, and you're like, ooh, maybe this is the time I can guarantee it. Guess what's easy to hit roots on? Slowed heroes. And so hindering Moonfire can help you enable your own setup. Again, I would say wait for your team because even if you root them, is your team going to help? It's a little scary to say that you can, which means you're sacrificing your position if your tank's not already there. Nature's Swiftness. Malfurion gains 6% movement speed for every active regrowth. I don't think this is bad. It's just like, what do I need it for? I shouldn't be putting myself into too many terrible positions. I should be able to dodge skill shots, but if I need this and there's a lot of things going on, I need to dodge a lot of skill shots. I need to be able to sidestep stuff. Nature's Swiftness is okay, but hindering Moonfire, fantastic ability to be able to take advantage of short cooldowns, control frontliners, and potentially set up a lot of stuff for yourself as well. At level 16, Nature's Balance is so good. Increase Moonfire's area by 25% and regrowth's duration by 3 seconds. You remember this was wild growth earlier. You're going to get that value here. This is where your team fights are longer. They're more explosive. Increase the area means easier to slow, means easier to hit multiple targets. It now makes it a lot better to land that Moonfire, which means more effective healing, more accurate in terms of your Moonfire so that you can get that healing. And overall, it's going to help because it increases the duration of the regrowth, which is always a good thing. It makes your psychologically, I know that like when I have a regrowth on me versus like, ooh, this thing's getting low, there's only like a small little sliver left I have of this hot, am I going to get another one? This can help alleviate some of those issues for your team, getting that there. Nature's Balance, because of the extra duration, is the main thing, and it's much easier to hit the Moonfire with a bigger percentage. Nature's Balance, clear cut number 1. With the change to Rejuvenation at level 1 yesterday, like the day before this video, Ysera's growth actually does seem kind of okay. because if you have your own self-heal permanently without having to queue yourself, then this does make Ysera's gift that much easier. It's your heal over time is increased by 60%. I would say this is a very rare circumstance you would ever use this. The extra duration you're getting on this is already better. It just means more uptime, which means more heals over time anyways. This is just more temporary short-term heals. I think this could be okay versus a Lunara, barring you're not taking damage, because if you fall below 75%, dead talent. Dead talent. But Nature's Balance is really good. I'm not a big fan of Moonlit Harmony. Yes, you're going to get more healing. This is, again, a rare circumstances. If you picked Malfurion early and you're going against a lot of burst damage and you've been getting obliterated every fight, how can I make up for that? I would say this is a desperation pick. Nature's Balance still your first one. Everything else is highly, highly situational. And I'm just going to say go Nature's Balance. Level 20. If you went Tranquility and you know that you're going to have multiple fights late game, each enemy hero hit by Moonfire reduces the cooldown of Tranquility by 3 seconds. If I can hit more targets with Nature's Balance, this is actually really good. It's also going to increase your healing 10% per ally affected by regrowth. Again, you want to have at least 4 regrowths up at all times, so you're going to get more healing from Tranquility, a lot more healing, plus you're going to get cooldown reduction, so that's there. The cooldown reduction, it sometimes has an impact, it other times doesn't, but the extra healing is good. Now, there is one really good talent here otherwise. Life Bloom, again, would be a desperation pick, but Lunar Shower is actually really good. If Moonfire hits a hero, its cooldown is reduced by 1 second. The next Moonfire within 6 seconds deals 20% more damage. This bonus stacks up to 60%. And if we did the math earlier, right, if Moonfire is a 3-second cooldown and I get a 2-second slow off hindering Moonfire, guess what now is 100% uptime with the Moonfire, 25% permanent slow, because this is now a 2-second cooldown that I have every time I press W. If I hit a hero, that's another 2-second cooldown. Not only that, but that also means more healing, because every time I'm hitting that W, it means that I'm also healing my team. I'm also doing damage, and if I went any bit of damage at Celestial alignment, now I'm blasting these people. Even tanks, you can sit there and you can poke them down and they have to walk away from it. Lunar Shower can be good. I still think Serenity is good. Again, situational. You have to look at how much healing do I need for these fights. And that just takes 10, 15 games of Malfurion to start to understand you're using Tranquility. You face different compositions. You see what type of damage they're doing. There's a lot of different ways to do that. So Serenity can be really good. Lunar Shower can be pretty good in the right situation. Life Bloom is a desperation talent. Astral Communion, you're out there trying to make the plays. You can put it on YouTube, put it on Reddit. Trust me, nobody's watching it. Nobody even watches these videos. And if you've made it this far, congratulations. But Astral Communion, just, it's appealing. It's appealing. Again, extremely situational. And if you did go Twilight Dream, Lunar Shower would be your number one pick for all the reasons I stated before. A couple things to go with Entangling Roots. Again, Alt-E is going to be the best thing. If you're not putting Rejuve on yourself and you've gone against anybody that has any type of dive, you no longer have Ice Block. If you remember, Malfurion used to have Ice Block. You Alt-E, which self-cast it directly at your feet. You don't even have to point. You just self-cast it at your feet. Heroes this works well against. ETC, back in the day, anytime you see an ETC stage dive, he puts down a giant circle where he's landing. Guess what you can put down right in the middle of that? Your own circle. So when ETC lands, he's rooted, and he can't power slide on anybody, and ETC's silly. Medivh, another good counter. Anybody that can counter portals that come through. A lot of things you can do with Entangling Roots, zoning, setting up offensively, following up your team, using it defensively a lot of times. I think it's the number one thing. The rest of his kit obviously is there. With Innervate, I can't even begin. I mean, it's pretty easy to see whose mana bars are low, whose abilities are more important. If you're in the middle of a team fight, your Johanna's at 30% mana and your Li Ming's at 50% mana. Who do I want to go? Do I want that Johanna to have more cooldowns for more control? Or do I want the cooldown reduction to affect my Li Ming or one of my mages because they're going to have more damage from those abilities? And I think each situation is different. I don't think there's a perfect answer for this because both of them can have an impact on the fight. But if you see one has a more favorable position, your damage dealer is just popping off, go ahead and innervate them, give them that extra cooldown reduction on their abilities. That helps a lot. Their basic ability cooldowns recharge 50% faster, plus they're going to have the mana. So there's a lot of different stuff that you can go there. So there you go. There you go. That's Malfurion in a nutshell. There is a question in chat about Life Bloom for Stitches. Diablo with the high health targets, because this is 10% of their missing health, it means they're going to get a bigger chunk of that healing. It also means that you're probably going to have to cast Regrowth on the same target more than once, which means that you're also not going to complete the cycle. You should probably be more reliant on your W providing that heals. Again, if you're not worried about Tranquility and a lot of your fights are happening in between, Life Bloom, again, can have value. But normally you're 1 and 2 picks because everything that you've built for so far says that you have enough healing, and everything about percentage healing or bigger burst healing is going to be extremely dependent on the enemy team and whether they just have full-on burst. Like if you're going against a Garrosh Taunt and a Colossus Smash Varian and something else, then yeah, you're probably going to want to have bigger heals as a result. And let's say there's a Jaina on the other side. You're like, it doesn't matter how much I heal. First off, you've already picked the wrong healer, which is why I said don't pick Malfurion early. But you've already picked the wrong healer and you're just going to get blasted. And there's really not a lot you can do in that situation. But if you find yourself in that situation, there are backup talents. But for what it's worth, your talents, Celestial Alignment, Rejuvenation, I kind of like now. Celestial Alignment, any of the roots, very dependent on what you need for your team. The enemy healer, Deep Roots, I like as a default. Level 7 Nature's Cure, get used to using it. Tranquility 1A, Twilight Dream, maybe a 1B, but probably just number 2. Hindering Moonfire, Nature's Balance, and Serenity or Lunar Shower, whichever one you picked. And that's Malfurion. He's a lot better than you realize. Stop spamming your E! Stop it! Don't do it! Stop spamming your E. That's how you're losing your mana and you can't keep people up in a team fight. Don't do it.